r/AskReddit. What happened at your school that shocks you to this day? It doesn't shock me much because it was that crazy, but because how crazy we thought it was at the time. When I was around 11 or 12 and AIM or MSN were huge, there was a dummy account who suddenly started messaging a few of us with taunting messages, telling us that we were on their list. A couple other kids who weren't told that they were on the list tried messaging whoever it was and asking basically what that means. And they'd get variations on "their time is running out" or "clock's ticking." Within about a week or so, it started escalating offline. We'd find photos of us printed off and left around the school with red X's drawn over our faces. Some of us had X's scratched on our lockers. One girl found a dead rat in her locker. Another guy had a chalk X on his home front door. And the wildest thing is nobody ever said anything. We laughed it off as a so weird thing. It wasn't until recently that a friend and I were talking about it in retrospect that I realized how fucked up it was, but that is some bad movie script level setup for a school shooting, and we didn't say anything. The girl who found the rat had a friend get it out for her. The guy at home washed off the X before his parents got home. And nothing ever happened. The messages started dying out, and that was the end of it. But if my little sister told me today that happened to her, I'd probably want nothing less than for them to fully investigate it and have her stay home from school until it's resolved. Yeah, that is really creepy. But I can't help imagining some kid at your school who has obviously watched too many horror movies going, "I'm going to freak everyone out. It's going to be great." And he or she starts with the AIM messaging and no one is that bothered. So he's like pictures with X's and X's on lockers. That will be really creepy. And you guys are all like, "Huh, weird. Guess I have to clean off my locker." And he's like, "WTF. Okay, I got it. Up a notch. Dead rat." And you guys are still just mildly bothered. I'm just laughing imagining him losing his shit going, "I did all the horror movie things. Why isn't this working? Why aren't they scared?" And eventually giving up. The caretaker/maintenance guy murdered 2 of the school kids and then burned their bodies. Although it happened after I left, it was still a bit of a shock to see my old village school plastered all over the main news for weeks on end. Was that Holly and Jessica? I remember this about 15 years ago. My first introduction to stranger danger being extended to somebody you might know. I remember the murderers, Ian Huntley. Terrible attempt at excusing what happened. Huntley admitted that the girls had died in his house. He claimed that he accidentally knocked Wells into the bath while helping her control a nosebleed, and this caused her to drown. Chapman witnessed this, and he claimed that he accidentally suffocated her while attempting to stifle her screaming. By the time he realized what he was doing, it was too late to save either of them. Based on this version of events, he admitted manslaughter. In 6th grade, a girl left the school crying and never came back. I didn't know what was happening at the time, but it turns out the girl had been pregnant and the 2 girls who knew, her friends, had told everyone about it. Now, this happened in Bhutan in the mid-2000s, so not everyone in grade 6 was 11 years old. This girl was 15 over 16 at the time. Her friends were the same age. I was 11, and I knew the girl. She would treat me like a younger brother, picking me up from home on her way to walk to school and dropping me off in the evening. This image of her using the hem of her tego, like a blazer for girls, to wipe her tears as she walked away is burned into my eyes. Every time I see the specific green shade of our school uniform, I think of her. She came from a poor family and I guess they made a little money through an informal bed and breakfast. The man who raped this little girl was a taxi driver. Our English teacher knew she was pregnant, and the plan had been to have the girl deliver the baby during summer break discreetly. But the girl's friends could not keep their mouths shut. I never heard from her again. I've asked about her, and the only things I've heard in the last few years is that she eventually did go back to school. I get so angry thinking about this. That's actually quite sad. I hope she's doing well. The principal called the entire school into an emergency assembly one morning to deliver news a student had died. Her friends were distraught. Everyone was all morbid and lost in thought that morning until the girl came to school and had no idea what was going on. Holy shit. What did the school do in response to that? They went pretty quiet for the rest of the day, and I think we had another assembly the next day and the principal apologized for the misunderstanding. At least that's how I remember it. Woke up and walked down the hall of my dorm to find someone had taken a shit in the water fountain. My first year at university, our dorm housekeeper was an older black dude named Thomas. He was well liked because not only did he keep the place spotless, but he would do things like buy liquor for us as long as he could join the party, and he usually showed up with an armload of early R&B albums for the turntable. One morning around mid-year, a bunch of us were having coffee, getting ready for the day, and Thomas turns up at the door, saying, "I don't mean to complain, but someone has done shit in the sink." We walk down to the bathroom and sure enough, there's a mammoth dirt snake in the center sink. The general consensus was that Thomas shouldn't have to deal with that, but how were we going to find out who did it? Someone with a high fiber diet obviously was the first suggestion, but then we realized it couldn't have been a resident but a visitor. So we started asking around, and sure enough, a guy at the end of the hall said that a friend had been over the night before and had gone down to the bathroom and taken a long time. I thought he was whacking off was his excuse. We walk over to the guy's dorm, corner him, and bring him back to our hall to clean up. "You guys got a scoop or something?" he whined. "Use your hands, asshole." So he did. Afterwards, Thomas gave us some bleach to sanitize things. I happened to be talking to a couple of my old housemates this past weekend and this very story came up. Sadly, Thomas went on to the great dorm in the sky a couple years ago. We toasted his memory and hoped he was hanging out with the new students, drinking Jack Daniels, and listening to James Brown. Edit. Thanks, kind internet strangers. A brief note about Thomas. By mid-year he was one of the guys. As far as we were concerned, we had befriended a guy who was maybe a little lonely, and he loved to talk about two things, and B and college hoops. There is always someone at a college party you can talk to about that. And frankly, as a survivor of Jim Crow, this was the early 70s, I think he loved to see all the black kids at the party hanging out and grooving to the music he brought. And he was also smart enough to know that if anything went sideways he'd probably be arrested and definitely fired. If things got hairy he'd ghost, leaving behind a few albums for us to discover. I still have a copy of James Brown Live at the Apollo he recommended to me. As for the culprit, he laughed and admitted the deed when we first asked. I think he believed we had come over to share his excellent joke. He was surprised when we said he had to come over and clean up his shit. Anyway, RIP Thomas. You deserve it. The cheerleaders were selling sweatshirts for a fundraiser. One of them asked a teacher if he wanted to buy one. Teacher looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'll give you $50 for the one you're wearing right now." Needless to say, that was his last day as a teacher. That was almost 25 years ago. I still can't comprehend how a grown-ass man could throw his career away in a single sentence like that. Yeah, I know you're like 14 years younger than me, but you gotta remember, age is just a number. Happy cake day. A friend of mine was 13 when she was groomed by a teacher when we just started high school. She would linger after the school day and meet him in his classroom where they would make out. It lasted about a year. He had his ML account open on his class computer one day when she was waiting for him, and she saw that he was emailing a handful of other girls at the school. She testified against him about 6 years later. He was never struck off. Taught at the school for a long time. Married one of the teachers from the same school who supported him during his court hearings. How on earth was he not struck off, much less be arrested? I honestly don't know. He had a short leave of absence, less than a year, and then returned to the exact same school. His wife taught there too. We had a game in gym class simply called the game. We had to get a yoga ball to touch the opposing team's goal inside the gym. There were minimal rules. One of them being you could only use your body to play the game. For example, you couldn't stab other players with knives etc. You could only fight if it was to get the yoga ball. You couldn't be too aggressive to people smaller than you, etc. The gym teachers used this game to settle differences in the different gangs in the school, and it worked. I heard that this tradition had started because there had been constant violent fights in the courtyard during lunch and school staff was sick of it, so they called the entire school into the gym and said this would be used to settle differences. I honestly believe this worked because people ended up just really liking the game and it was exercise. So these high schoolers would just get worn down, friendships were made, rifts and gangs were mended, and all was well. I hear they play the game now mostly for funsies, but sometimes still to mend rifts. I just lost the game. My 7th grade English teacher used to have an anger problem. Granted, I went to a bad school in a bad neighborhood, but he still got angry over nothing. He used to threaten to throw desks if we misbehaved too much. One time this dude was yelling at a student and slapped the ruler down on the table. It broke in half and splinters flew everywhere. He was given Teacher of the Year later that year. Yeah, they were scared to not give him Teacher of the Year. I had a teacher in 7th grade that had a cabinet full of 3/8" dowel rods that he used to point to things on the board and call kids in class. If someone wasn't paying attention or being a nuisance in class, he would snap it over the desk or on his knee. Coolest teacher ever, and it definitely worked as he had the highest test scores in our grade. Our 8th grade teacher, a crazy nun who must have been in her 70s, literally flipped a kid's desk once. So much shit happened that year that nobody batted an eyelash. But the icing on the cake was that the kid she was upset with and a couple other kids were not at their desks at the time, and after all the ruckus, the kid calls out from the other side of the room, you flipped the wrong desk. A bunch of guys were playing basketball in the court outside. IDK how to describe it cause English isn't my first language, but basically one of the guys was hanging on the thing where you shoot the ball and it broke. The guy hit his head on the ground. He died instantly. Thank God I didn't witness that, otherwise I would have been able to handle it. They were hanging on the hoop. That no one broke a bone during the crowbar fights. It wasn't crowbars. A couple of children used to pull the rusty iron railings out of the wall and wail on the other kids. Most other people used sticks or stones in homemade slings. Somehow, we all got out of it relatively unscathed. Mostly scrapes, cuts and bruises. Looking back, we must have been holding back, because Bulldogs was a different story and at least 3 kids broke a leg playing that. Do I want to know about Bulldogs? Of course you do. It's a great game. Just, banned in most places now due to the whole broken leg business. A group of kids stands in a crowd on one side of the play area. The goal is to get to the other side, past the Bulldogs in the middle, without getting caught. The Bulldogs will catch you by any means necessary, but dislams, sucker punches, tackles, anything goes. If you get got, you become a Bulldog too, and get to bedislam people as well. The last kid dodging tackles wins. We'd get whole school years playing it at once, almost 200 kids at a time, so people would be trampling each other, smacking into each other on purpose, falling on top of one another, and trampling other kids. It got bloody quick, but that just made it more fun. When I was a freshman, a senior boy committed suicide by closing up the family garage and leaving the car running. It all came out that his parents were putting a lot of pressure on him to succeed at school, sports, and other extracurricular activities, and he was profoundly unhappy. The guy was extremely well liked and no one saw it coming. The shocking part, to me anyway, was how the school made him vanish. No articles in the local newspaper, cut his picture out of the yearbook, and basically forbade any active discussion of his death. Forget skipping class to go to the memorial, it's better to move on quickly. This is a quite standard procedure when it comes to suicides. They make them vanish to prevent other people that are suicidal to do it themselves. In example, if they spread the news, it could be seen as motivation to some to do the same. I told this story before, but a kid in my brother's Catholic high school put a matchbook under my brother's belt at the base of his back and lit it on fire. as a prank. I guess, causing a pretty severe burn. His coach saw it and assumed the worst, abuse, and had my parents called in. After they threatened my dad with child abuse, my brother finally told them what happened, and they were going to expel the kid who did it. My dad went to bat for the kid and said it was a stupid mistake and that the right education would assure that this would never happen again. The kid got to stay in the school based only on what my dad said. 2 weeks after this, my brother got caught outside a school dance with a Bartles and James wine cooler and was going to be expelled. They called my dad in again and told them they were expelling my brother, and my dad flipped out. I convinced you to keep the boy that set my son on fire in this school, and you are going to kick my son out for drinking a wine cooler. What the fuck is wrong with you? My brother got to stay in school because my father was incredibly large and intimidating. And you know, it was bullshit. Schools are way too willing to throw troubled kids out. School is the place they need to be, not on the streets. I remember when my school replaced in-school suspensions, day-long detentions, with out-of-school suspensions to save money. These kids loved not having to be at school. What did they do? Lots of drugs. That's what they did. My sister was this kind of kid. She did well when she was in school, but she got caught smoking weed. She was suspended for 3 weeks. The judge put her on probation for it. At a random check-in she got caught drinking alcohol underage. They put her in jail, an adult jail, for 3 months. She missed too much school and she couldn't graduate. The jail wouldn't let her do coursework. Our school expelled her when she got out because the principal thought she was a weed pusher. She wasn't. After a year of limbo, she went to an alternative school with other troubled kids. There, she became friends with some bad characters. One thing led to another, and she was serving jail sentence after jail sentence. She got her JED at 21, but any other prospects for her are nearly gone. Since most schools can't actually punish you, they resort to giving you less and less time actually in class, and expect your parents to do something. The troubled kids I have met have parents that really don't care about whatever they do in school. When I was in my final year in high school, a technician had come to work on the broken account unit. It was mid-June and hot as the devil's balls in the school. I remember seeing the technician roll up in the school board utility van in the morning. After first period between class, myself and dozens of other students saw the custodian running through the lobby of the school yelling at kids to get out of the way, followed by 2 paramedics. It turns out the power hadn't been properly cut to whatever the technician had been working on. Everyone kind of hung around waiting to see what happened. About 5 minutes later they bring this guy out of the door, which led up to the utility room. Turns out the guy had been electrocuted and died the moment went to begin work. We didn't know it at the time. We assumed he was unconscious. Left behind 2 young kids. Really sad day. Male teacher, who was married with a new baby, slept with a student. I think student was around 16. The most memorable part was when another teacher walked into the middle of class one day and punched him after finding out they were good friends. Also, it was a Christian school, lol. We had a very well-liked Spanish teacher who was killed by his father while visiting his dying mother because he was gay. It was a huge story for our town. The entire week was filled with grief counselors and memorials. It was really crazy. So in the woodshop there was this extra bathroom that he teacher let some of the boys use if they didn't want to go all the way down to the end of the hallway to use the main restroom. Well, he decided to close it down and never let anyone use it again. Wanna know why? Some kid never found out who pooped in his hand and smeared it on the wall and even drew little pictures with it. This was in middle school, ages 11, 14. Fucking middle school. A popular football athlete kills his pregnant cheerleader ex-girlfriend. I made that sound terrible, but it's true. I was friends with the both of them. Not to mention they were really well liked. The school took sides. Grief counselors everywhere. Fights happened. Memorials were put up, and more. We were a very small town in Indiana, and the murder put us on the map for all the wrong reasons, since it made national headlines. School has never been the same, and my trust has taken a huge toll. Was talking to my friend about it, and we both agreed that since then, it would be hard to trust anyone. It was such a sucky blow, though. I'll miss her, and I'll feel weird about him forever. Almost crazy to think that Cole'd been my best friend, because early last year, before the murder 11 months later, her and the football player were talking. I guarantee you that, if you searched up high school football player kills girlfriend Indiana or something like that, you can find the article just about anywhere. Miss Horrifying High School? 8th graders were dealing tea, as if it was cocaine. In my school we only had a water vending machine and people wanted other stuff, so some kids bring in some dollar store tea, and start dealing it for $1.50 a bag. This blew up, because everyone was all in one area for recess, so the teachers got suspicious. Some kids were talking about getting a couple of bags, so the teacher flipped her shit and the kids went to the office. There it came out people were selling tea bags, and not crack or weed, but the teachers banned it anyway, because it was against school policy or something like that. When I was 13 someone in my school shat on the floor in one of the corridors whilst everybody was outside for the break. And it wasn't hidden in a corner, it was in plain sight in front of windows and a glass door that led outside. Someone saw the turd from outside and everybody gathered around the door to look at the principal picking it up with a paper towel. We only learned who had done it a while after the event, and it turns out it was this really weird kid that used to be in my class in primary school, and when I say weird I mean that he used to write about murdering and mutilating bodies when we wrote short stories as 10-year-olds. Weird kid changed school after the turd fiasco and I haven't seen him since, but I'm very curious to know what became of him. Some say he is still pooping on floors regularly. A student was arrested when there was information on how to build a bomb on his computer. He seemed like a nice kid. I was completely normal, still am, but when I was a kid had infatuations with fireworks and electronics and all that. I used to play Mad Professor and think I was building bombs. Granted I had no fucking idea what I was doing, but I never actually achieved anything besides the works and aluminum foil bomb. When I was 15, don't know what it is, look it up. Works bombs. They were pretty harmless, unless you stood right next to one, or did something stupid with it, but they made a loud bang. There was a yearly sport event at my former HS that was 24 hours long and students were of course smashed/high and weren't allowed to go outside after 19.00. Now this guy wasn't shit-faced or anything, but he wasn't allowed into any of the school's toilets. So he made a choice. What shocked me was that I couldn't imagine how could he shat on a handle that was about a good 30 centimeter higher than his ass, and he had nothing he could stand on. He didn't pick it up. He didn't get fucked by the handle. He somehow managed to put a full-born fecal baby on the handle, just to be found the next day. He never told us how he did it, but was never caught, even though he was notorious for shitting on strange places. TL. Doctor, my friend shat on a door handle back in HS. Jew week. For our 8th grade Holocaust unit there was a week that a 1/5 of the grade each day would be Jews. They had to wear stars, weren't allowed to talk, had to sit at the back of the classroom sometimes facing a wall, couldn't use the hallways, had to go outside to get to class, and had to go to lunch late and sit in a separate section of the cafeteria. There were also SS officers to make sure the Jews complied with the rules. It didn't last through the first day. Kids started attacking the Jews, pushing, shoving, punching. It was also pouring down raining that day, so the Jews had to walk through the mud because there weren't sidewalks, all while ruining their books. The worst part was probably that we had one kid in our grade who had Jewish descent, whose grandparents died in the actual Holocaust, and he was a Jew on the first day. He by far got it the worst and left school early with ripped clothes and a bloody nose, crying. Now I think back and wonder if any of the decision makers had ever heard of the Stanford prison experiment. Yeah, I was thinking about the Stanford prison experiment as I was reading this. Who the fuck approved this? What the hell? Thank you so much for watching the entire video. I would be so grateful if you could like this video. and subscribe to the channel. New videos every day.